Hi, welcome to Flory Models. I'm Philip Flory. This particular build we're going to be doing is the Revell 172 scale Transall. Now this is the C160. We've all probably heard of the C130, the Hercules. This is the sort of baby version of it, if you like. Lots of European countries fly this particular aircraft, and there is some quite sort of boring colour schemes out there, if you say, but Germany does tend to keep with the camouflage pattern. That a lot of the other NATO countries especially tend to just do them sort of boring grey colour, all over tone grey. So what we're going to do, we're going to be camouflaging this one up. Now a quick run through the actual kit itself. As I say, being Revell, it's Revell of Germany, so the instructions do tend to be quite busy, shall we say, or complicated, but obviously taking your time working through would be okay. A couple of things with this particular kit which is very nice, with sort of the way that sort of Revell of Germany have been doing them recently, is they're very nicely detailed, and you get lots of details which unfortunately we're not going to be able to see because they're going to be inside. But for instance, you've got quite a detailed cockpit, and the seats actually are multiple parts to go together, so it's going to be a little bit complex doing it that way. Same with the gear, it's quite complex how that all goes together and everything else. And then obviously we've got a full interior detail as well, with obviously seats and things like that. So we're going to do this particular one with the cargo ramp down as if it's on the ground. So obviously we're going to have it in the sort of shut down position, cargo ramp down. So you have got various options that you're going to have to take care of. And as I say, because there's multiple countries that fly this aircraft, there's multiple versions of this kit with different things on them and everything else. So obviously there was an earlier version to this kit which doesn't need obviously lots of lumps and bumps that this particular one has and things like that. Things to remember on this kit, which it just reminded me just down here, we're going to need a lot of weight in this one. It's going to need around about 30 grams, we reckon, for weighing this one out. But as you can see, it's quite complex as we go through. We have got some nice little touches as well, things like we've got the main APU system for the power supply, things like that, the ramp, the way that that goes down. As I say, the gear is quite complicated, the way that all goes in as well, because you've actually got sections. You might be able to see it just down here, and it shows a lot of detail. Unfortunately, you don't really see them, which is a bit of a shame. And everything else. A few things to remember with the kit: you only get, when you go through the actual parts of this particular version, which is what we call the sort of NG version, okay, which is the slightly newer one, you get one prop, and you think to yourself in the kit, why has it only got one prop? Just move this one out. There we go. So we get this standard type of kit, if you like, but you do get an extra couple of sprues. So just down here we've got this one, so we've got slightly different panels to go on and things like that, but you get one prop, and you think to yourself, why have you only got one prop? Turns out, a little bit of research, that if you have a look online, that the actual aircraft, this particular aircraft, was only fitted with one new prop on one side of the actual engine. The other one is the old prop. Not 100% sure for the reasons of why that actually is on this particular one. But as you can see here, we just pop this one out of the bag. You can probably see here that the aircraft does have all the things we'd look for in modern aircraft. So we've got recessed panel lines. They're a little bit softly done, and unfortunately down this back area here we do have this ribbing, which is a lovely detail for what we'll need, does show through on the actual skin of the aircraft itself. Now I'm going to use this to my advantage and make it look like stressed skin, because sometimes when you look at aircraft you get that stressed skin effect. So there's a little weathering we're going to be doing with pre-shading, lightening the paintwork to give this stressed look to it, perhaps down here. As I said, lovely detail, recessed panels and everything else on that. Some very nice details on things like the braking system and those. So it's going to be a very nice kit to do. We've got a nice mixture of internal detail, which we'll see through obviously things like these cargo doors, which we'll have open, and we can do a little bit of weathering and fading around with the main aircraft. So let's get this all sorted out and get on with the build. Okay, so it begins. So if we just sort of outline what we're going to try and do with this one. Now, for the first part, obviously, just going through the instructions, one thing I will just say is I can't stand the way that Revell do their instructions with these colour code outs and things like that, are just A, B, C's and D's, and then you have to mix colours and all the rest of it. If they would just use standard numbering, it'd be so much easier for the modeller. Right, okay, apart from that little grudge, little things, we're not going to worry too much about the cockpit area. I've started cutting out all these little tiny bits, as you can see here. There is a good reason for that. The reason being Here's one I prepared earlier. Okay, this is the cockpit section. This gives you the rough idea of the size. So it's going to be one of those models which is more on the outside than it certainly is the inside. Now the cockpit area itself looks quite big, but when you think and you come along with the glass area, the only bit inside the cockpit you're going to be able to see is this taped up area here. Okay, so you're going to be looking through 1 centimetre square windows at its biggest, and then probably ½ centimetre squares at its smallest. So you're not going to see all the detail that's inside the cockpit. That is the only drawback when you're dealing with a smaller scale. It's a big aircraft, so it's going to be more of an external thing. Obviously, we do want to see some nice little details in there. So they're things we can basically do. So I'm not going to go around and paint every single seat and detail it and weather and dry brush them right the way through. So what I tend to do with these types of scales is build them as a whole. Okay, first put them all together, spray it, and then I'm going to go around and pick out all the details by brush by hand afterwards. Give it a dry brush, give it a wash, and then you've actually got some decals that actually go on to sort of detail it up a little bit more. That I think will suffice perfectly well for what we're going to be able to see inside the cockpit, because as I say, it's going to be dark, it's tiny little windows, and you're not going to see much in there. I'd rather spend the time doing the weathering job we want to do on this one, and certainly working in the cargo bay where you will see a little bit more because it is more open and things like that. So that's the point. But obviously that's my personal thing. If you wanted to go along and obviously, you know, spend more time, you know, a couple of days doing the cockpit to detail it up and things like that, by all means you can. There's certainly lots of things you could do, and I've done in the past, and if you have a look at some other builds, by using things like foil or certainly tape harnesses, things like that, to make it look a little bit more lively inside, then fair enough. And if you did want to go to the extreme, like we've done in some of the past builds, you could obviously put lighting in. That way you'll see a lot better in there. But from my point of view, we're going for the more overall type of thing. We're going to go for this one to look like it's had a hard life, which certainly I saw one of these aircraft and had a good look around it a few years ago at the International Air Tattoo at Fairford. And I've got some photos here, and as you can see, it's really, really worn. These aircraft get a heavy duty life. This is what they do. They haul, you know, trash haulers. I know they've got all the nicknames and everything else that go with them, and that is the point of them. They do have a hard life. You know, they're rugged, reliable aircraft, and that's what I'm going to try and do with this one to give it the overall. So obviously it is quite a big lump. So by the time we got the wings on, here's one of these said wings. This is just a bottom of a wing, but once it's on, as you can see, it's going to be quite big. It's going to be, you know, basically the width of the bench here and everything else. So that way we can spend a lot more time trying to give a nice three-dimensional, weathered, like that photo showed, weathering job on the outside of this. And certainly with the cargo bay down, we've got a nice big cargo bay you can see in here, so we can do some little things in here to detail this area up and things. So, just to start with, just move those out of the way and bring you guys in a minute. Obviously, what we're going to do is put together everything that is still needed. We're not going to skip any steps, you know, as such, but what we are certainly going to do is just speed things up with the build. So already I've cleaned up all these little parts down here, multi-parts to these seats. As I said, it's nice detail, certainly on the scale. It's just a real shame we're not going to see too much of it. So obviously we've got the seats, we've got things like wheels and things to go in there and everything else like that. So what we're going to do to start with is just basically pop in all the areas that are needed. So I'm using liquid cement for this one right the way through. So what we're going to do for the moment is just build the cockpit area. Okay, and as I say, it's a great fit. As you can probably hear, it's all snap tight fit. Okay, we've got a rear one as well. I'm going to put these bulkheads in, and then we'll pop the seats in. So obviously pop in the rear bulkhead in, a little bit of extra thin glue, and just wipe that around, and make sure you've still got a nice fit, because this is going to go inside of this fuselage, so you need it to fit in there quite nicely. Otherwise, if you've got any gaps and joins and misfits, it's not going to fit in there particularly nicely, and you end up going to have to sand it. So make sure everything sits in flush and everything else. That's a good secret for doing internal parts. So we'll just pop some glue on here. This is for the where the instrument panel is going to go, and just before that I'm going to pop in the control columns, both sides. Again, just going to pop these in. Pop them in now because they'll be a lot easier to put in before the thing. So I'm not going to put the yokes on yet because they're likely to get hit. Okay, you can always glue from the bottom because you've got the little spots showing here underneath. You might be able to see, we can get the camera up, there we go. These spots, great little technique. Come along, just put a dot of extra thin on them. It'll weld it up. It will also seal on the other side as you go around and things like that. Bit more glue up into here. Okay, nicely fit that on. As I said, we're going to build it. You could do this slightly different and spray them all separately, add the decals onto them and move away, but I'm just doing this really also for speed as well, so we're not sort of hanging around too far on these places. So we have both all these little seat areas, so we just make sure we have got them all the right way around, and our little seats here. The little seats will fit on the top, so plenty of extra thin. Okay, they're quite fiddly, these little seats, how they all go in and they sit and things like that, so just take your time. I'm sort of rushing this a little bit. It would be nicer if they were totally dry. They're still a little bit wet as well. Well, there's one. Little guy. Then two. Okay, just checking to make sure which has width. So the one with the long, both, one has feet, one doesn't. The one with these bars on the back is going to be the one without the headrest. So just make sure you get the right seat for the right base, not the headrest. Again, don't be frightened to come in underneath with glue and let the capillary action pull it all up. As I say, seat bases are a little bit wet at the moment. Our seat. Fit that one in, and they all go very nicely. So a little bit just to attach the side rails to the main areas. Okay, then we can fit the seats just in here. So as we say, we're just checking around which ones we have and all the rest of it. And for this one, what we're going to do is just going to pull a little bit of super glue to hold these into place because they're quite fiddly. Normally you could use normal glue, but just a little bit of 40mm tape. Let's place this down here. A little bit of super glue. This is just a medium super glue. Literally the tape's just to protect the bench, and it'll just hold these in a little bit nicer. So we've got these two. So super glue in the bottom and then into the base. There you go. And they'll just sit in the tracks. Okay, then obviously you've got engineer station, will face to the rear. So it's a little bit awkward. And as I say, don't worry too much about how you're thinking this one's going to go, because we can do all types of little tiny little subtle things to bring this alive. Okay, last seat, it'll be just the flight engineer's centre. which will go in, and there is a very quick and easy way of doing it. So what we'll do, we're going to put the control yokes on as well. Just clear this away, we'll get some paper down and we get it sprayed. So okay, we're going to spray this now that's dried. So what we've got here is XF19. Now I know this is too light for what we need, but I'm going to give it a wash, and we're going to airbrush a wash over it, so that will darken it down and give us roughly about the colour we're after. So what we're going to do is get in from every conceivable angle you can think of. So obviously get around all these areas. So front, backs, bottoms, sides. Okay, we've just got the little staircase, which as I said again will get a real heavy duty wash as well. This will just show you how quickly you can get a very nice looking cockpit up. So there we go, there's our little cockpit done just like that. So what we're going to do, we'll just pour this back into here. Just as much as possible, just blow out some more of that grey we don't want. Okay, and then we're just going to come in with black, straight into on top of the grey, just for a minute. I'll show you why in a sec, it does make sense. Okay, black goes straight in on top, just like that, and then we take our thinners. So we've just got normal X20A thinners. Grab our pipette. Just take a generous amount, okay, mixing it with the both. Okay, so it's about a 50-50 mix in there now. Okay, just grab our paint mixer. So this will then turn it to a very, very dark grey. Okay, just like that, and then we're going to rethin it again. So really you've got 90% thinners in here to paint. As you can tell, because it's flicking everywhere now. Okay, and then we'll just blow this through, because you will have solid paint at the beginning before it turns into the washy stuff. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just lightly go around the floor. To start with, and as you can see, let it all run around everywhere. And then the tops. And what will happen is it looks quite dark on camera at the moment, but it will lighten up in a moment as it dries back, and it will all go in all the recesses and everything else like that. So it's got a little pot here for just such washes and icky bits. So we'll pop that in there. Then all we're going to do is just cut to air and dry this back. And to be honest, it's looking a little bit dark, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop back and relighten it again, and that will give us, between the two, a very nice working area. And obviously it's getting lighter already. It's actually not far off that colour we wanted. So I think by the time we come back with a thin version of just the plain grey, we should be about where we want to be. So what we'll do, we're just going to pop some grey in here. Thin 50-50. Just like that. And obviously we've got the black, so that will grey up and it'll stop it looking quite as sharp. Just do like here. And then what we can do, okay, grey's coming back in, so we're just going to hop around lighten up some of the areas again. And just give it that sort of worn look. Just going to grade paint the seats. So we're up to this type of a look, okay, which is what we sort of want. Multi-toned look to it, looking dirty, grubby and everything else. So what we're going to do now is literally go round and start to pick out some of the areas with brushes. So what I'm going to do is just do this a little bit to show you, and then obviously we'll pop back. So we've got on our brush here, we know this is wanted to be black across the top. Normally you'd let this dry, obviously. So I'm just going to do the back of the instrument panel. Picked up grey though, I want black. Okay, so there we go. That's our cockpit painted. Now you might have thought it was a little bit dark, but now you can see as you go around we pick out things, you can see it's a little bit lighter, and you might be able to see just down in there amongst the lights, you can see we've got the instruments on the actual dials. And there's one on this back one here as well. On camera. There we go. So really, that's all we're going to need. We're not going to see much in there. The only last thing to do is just give the seats a little bit of a wash. Now for that, I've got this wheel wash stuff. This is literally Indian ink, high quality Indian ink. Okay, probably around about 1 milliliter. So where's the pipette? About 1 milliliter to 50 of acrylic thinner. So I just used for this case X28, and that's all I did in here. And so it goes a long way, so it's very, very strong stuff. It's a bit like tattooist ink and things like that. So all I'm going to do is literally take a tiny bit on a brush, and we come along and just brush it onto the seat, and what you'll see is you'll see it all pull up and cling and all those things. And to start with, it always looks a bit dark, but let the capillary action do all the work for you. And you'll find it will zip off with the capillary action and do all the bits. But what it'll do, it'll just give you a more grimy look to the seats, a more worn look and things like that. And if you wanted to, you could do, I've done it on other builds, the entire cockpit area itself. But that's it for the cockpit. That's all we're going to do, because as I said, from the outside, look through the windows, we'll get a good idea of what's going on with the cockpit without being a little bit sort of, you know, over the top and fussy and everything else. Now, same time as we did that, we can do this. Now this is actually a step it is on the build. Steps 9, 10 and 11 on the build, which is actually the wheel well main section. Now the reason I've done that is two halves that go together and the back. It's very, very straightforward. But really the main reason for doing it is obviously it goes on the back here and becomes part. Now I'm not going to paint it now, because obviously we'll do that when it comes to the time, but that is just going to literally sit on like that. So we just take our paint, make sure we have got it the right way around. Open bit goes to the front, so generous bit of extra thin, and just let you say the capillary action do all the work. And get down there and working. If you give it a little bit of a wiggle, make sure you're all central. Pretty important to be central on this one, and there is a little bit of give in there. So there we go, that's our first section done, and having that nice area. Okay, so we've got a few little bits on the go. As you can see, cockpit is all done. Okay, all looking very nice in there, as you can probably see. Get the camera to lock in. There we go, you get the idea. Now, as I said, it's a bit of an effect, so instead of going around detailing it all really, really nicely, we've done it as an effect. We're going to do the same thing with the main cabin area as well, because you can't see tons of detail in there. And obviously, again, if you wanted to, you could go on and do tons and tons of detail into here. But quite honestly, I'm going to do this like we did the cockpit as an all-over effect. Now, a few things to take care of first. There is a couple of ejector pin marks all along all these sort of sides of the fuselage and the roof and things like that. Now, I've taken care of most of them. You might be able to see some little rough marks, but there are quite a few all around. So by getting in here with thin sanding sticks, I've deliberately left a few in here. There's one down here. so you can get them into the little nooks and crannies and try and get them out as best you can, because especially if you're going to have the side door open, it's going to be looking straight down into here. And what we're going to do is we're also going to pop a wash over it, and if we put a wash over this, it'll make the pin marks stand out really, really easy. We're going to airbrush a quick wash onto this just to make it look better. But I'd say when you look at this to start with, you can see one or two there's around that are really obvious and stand out quite easily. And then the more you look at it, the more you spot these little ones absolutely everywhere, all over it. Obviously it's a complex shape and it just helps it come out of the mould a bit easier and things like that. So we just give that one a rub in there. At the same time, you might be able to see on this side, we've got these on here. Now this is where the stretchers go, which is what I've just moved, and they go on the inside down in here, and we'll lean up against these bars. Now they're quite movable, so I'll probably be able to get in there. Just be careful as you clean those up, because I did snap all of them every time. For some reason there's like a weak spot in the plastic, and you touch them, they go. I've also put the activators on here for the side cargo door when that opens. So what we need to do now is give this a paint. Now the thing is, if we just grab a little bit of this, the old bounty. The thing is, when you do it, the actual colour that is used, it looks like a yellowy colour, but then when you look at certain reference photos, it's more of a sort of a buffy colour. So what we're going to do, we've got both the sides and the roof for these areas of where it is, and then same thing, we can go around and pick out that detail again and go around it. So we just blow this through, airbrush is clean. So what we're going to do, we're going to make up a little mixture. So what I'm going to take is, as our primary colour, we're going to use a sort of a buffy type colour. So we've got the buff here, which is a little bit too buff-like. We need to add just a tiny bit of yellow. So for that, we're going to be using XF57, and I'm going to mix it a tiny bit with a bit of XF4, which is this sort of yellow-green colour. So both of these will give a good old shake, because I haven't used them in quite a while. Just like so. And then what we're going to do, we're going to spray them on with unthinned, high air pressure. The reason for doing that is it will give us great texture. So we're just going to pour in the buff colour first, quite a bit of it, because we're going to need quite a bit of painting. Just in like that. If we just put that in the holder whilst I get the other lid open. And then we're going to take this yellow. Now this yellow is going to be quite strong and it will change the colour, but I'm just hoping it will give it that sort of buffy yellow tinge it's got. So we're just literally going to put in a few drops just in the colour cup like that. Just grab a brush and we'll give it a mix, and it has worked quite nicely to what we're after. So we've got this buffy yellowy type colour that it seems to be. It's certainly not yellow as Revell would have you call it out when you look at the reference photos. It could be a case of, obviously, over time it sort of gets that grubby colour and things like that. So we just blow that yellow through first, and then all we're going to do is go absolutely everywhere. All the sides of the pipes, down the sides, okay, around the other way, and do the fuselage sides. As I say, we've got pipe work there to pick out, but that's a far better colour than I think Revell were calling for. So we'll do the same down in here, just like so. I'll do press down here. And then obviously we've got the roof section as well. And all this is the insulation and soundproofing, which hangs. So if you wanted to, you could go along and give it a bit of a coat. Remember, if you're spraying neat paint or very thick paint, you might be able to see on the end here, we've got a blob. You see it just on the end. So if we touch it, you can see it wipes off on our finger. just like that. If you leave that on there, it will spit and spit and spit and spit and make everything really horrible. So there we go, that's those areas done. We'll let those dry off, pick out some of the pipe working and things like that, and then what we can do the same and spray the deck, which is just going to be obviously an aluminium steel, and it will get a wash as well. And at the same time, you've got a choice with the actual the seating. You can either do them red, which was the sort of latter, the earlier models had red. This day and age they tend to be sort of khaki green, and then obviously the strapping tends to be grey and things like that.